12 kilometers straight down. That is how far humans have drilled into the Earth. It happened in Europe, on a frozen peninsula in the Russian Arctic. Soviet scientists spent 24 years boring a hole through solid rock until the temperature melted the equipment and the planet itself told them to stop. But that borehole is not the only place in Europe where humans have gone deeper than they should. Beneath the mountains of Georgia, expedition teams have spent weeks underground in caves so deep that radio contact with the surface is impossible. Beneath the Czech Republic, a flooded abyss descends past the reach of any cable ever lowered into it, and no one has found the bottom. Beneath Austria, a cave system holds a record that has stood since 1998, and the man who set it climbed upward from a depth of 1,600 meters alone. These are the 10 deepest places in Europe that even scientists are afraid to explore. And by number 1, you will understand why the deepest hole ever drilled into the Earth was abandoned, capped with a rusted lid, and left in the Arctic to be forgotten. Before we start, drop a comment telling us where you are watching from and what time it is right now. Last video we had viewers from over 40 countries. Let us see if we can beat that. Number 10. Veryovkina, French Alps, the cave that became a death trap when it rained. In 1993, a team of French speleologists descended into a cave system in the Veryovkina Massif of the French Alps and reached a depth of 1,122 meters. At the time, it was the deepest any human being had ever been beneath the surface of the Earth. The Veryovkina held the world depth record for over a decade. The cave entrance sits at 1,460 meters above sea level in a landscape of alpine meadow and limestone plateau. From the surface, it is unremarkable, a hole in a field. What lies beneath that hole is a vertical labyrinth of shafts, cascades, and underground rivers that descend through the mountain for over a kilometer. The most dangerous feature of the Veryovkina is not the depth. It is the water. The cave system is fed by snowmelt and rainfall from the plateau above. When it rains on the surface, water enters the cave system with terrifying speed. Underground rivers that were ankle-deep can become chest-high torrents within hours. Passages that were dry on the descent become impassable on the return. In 1996, a caving expedition was trapped underground for 9 days when sudden rainfall flooded the upper passages. The team survived by retreating to higher chambers and waiting for the water to subside. Rescue teams on the surface could do nothing. The water blocked every route in and every route out. The cavers were alone, 500 meters underground in total darkness, with rising water and no way to communicate with anyone above. The Veryovkina has killed multiple people since its discovery. Drowning in flooded passages is the primary cause. The cave does not care about the weather forecast. It floods when the mountain decides to flood, and by the time you know it is happening, the exit is already underwater. A cave that held the world depth record. A cave that has trapped expedition teams for over a week, and a cave that fills with water so fast that the difference between a successful expedition and a fatal one is whether it rained on the surface while you were a kilometer below it. Number 9. The tunnels beneath a forgotten castle that nobody has fully mapped. Piotr, Ukraine. In western Ukraine, roughly 80 kilometers east of Lviv, a 17th century Renaissance castle sits in advanced decay on a hilltop above a village of 400 people. Piotr Castle was built in 1640 by the Polish military commander Stanislaw Konik-Polski. It was designed as both a fortress and a palace, a combination of defensive architecture and aristocratic luxury that made it one of the most significant buildings in Eastern Europe. Beneath the castle, and extending outward in directions that have never been fully determined, is a network of underground tunnels and catacombs that no expedition has completely explored. According to Ukrainian historians and the Lviv Institute of Architecture, the tunnel system was constructed during the original building of the castle as an escape route, storage network, and defensive system. Local accounts describe passages extending for kilometers, connecting the castle to nearby churches, to the village below, and to exits in the surrounding forest. But the tunnels have never been systematically surveyed. Sections have collapsed. Others are flooded. Some entrances have been sealed by Soviet-era concrete poured during the building's use as a tuberculosis sanatorium in the 20th century. The castle itself has been looted, burned, abandoned, and partially collapsed over the centuries. The structure above ground is in critical condition. The structure below ground is unknown. Local residents have reported discovering new tunnel entrances after heavy rains caused ground subsidence. In at least one documented case, a section of road near the castle collapsed into a previously unknown underground passage. What else is down there? How deep the system extends and where the tunnels lead are questions that remain unanswered. A 400-year-old castle falling apart above a tunnel system that nobody has mapped. Entrances appear when the ground collapses, passages disappear behind Soviet concrete. And somewhere beneath the hills of western Ukraine, a network of corridors built to protect people during a siege, has been waiting in the dark for nearly 4 centuries. Nobody is entirely sure how much of it is still intact. Nobody has gone far enough to find out. Number 8. Veryovkina Jama, Croatia. The cave where they found a new species at the bottom. In the Velebit Mountains along the Adriatic coast of Croatia, a cave system descends 1,431 meters into the earth. Veryovkina Jama is the deepest cave in Southeast Europe and among the 20 deepest on the planet. The cave begins with a series of vertical shafts. The first pitch drops 56 meters, the second drops 160 meters. The third is a free-hanging descent of 203 meters, one of the longest single vertical drops inside any cave in Europe. At the bottom of the third pitch, there is nothing to stand on except a narrow ledge above another shaft that continues downward. Expeditions to the bottom of Veryovkina Jama take multiple days. Teams must carry all equipment, food, water, and emergency supplies on their bodies while descending and ascending hundreds of meters of vertical rope. Communication with the surface is unreliable below 500 meters and impossible below 800. The temperature at the bottom hovers just above freezing. The humidity is constant at 100%. But the most remarkable discovery at Veryovkina Jama was not geological. It was biological. At the deepest explored sections of the cave, in pools of water that have never been exposed to sunlight, researchers discovered a previously unknown species of leech. Croatobranchus mestrovi, now classified as not only a new species but a new genus and a new family, is a leech that has evolved in total darkness in a cave over a kilometer beneath the surface of the earth. The leech is blind, it has no pigment, it feeds on organisms in the cave water that themselves survive on minerals dissolved from the rock. It represents a complete food chain that exists without any input from the surface. No sunlight, no photosynthesis, no connection to the world above. Just darkness, water, rock, and life that found a way. A cave 1,431 meters deep, where the biology at the bottom has never seen the sky. Where the animals have evolved in isolation so complete that they constitute not just a new species but a new biological family. And where the only way to reach them is to descend over a kilometer of vertical rope into a mountain that offers no way out except the way you came in. Number 7. Lamprechtsofen, Austria, the deepest through cave on Earth. In the Leoganger Steinberg Mountains of Salzburg, Austria, a cave system extends 1,735 meters in vertical depth and stretches for over 60 kilometers of mapped passages. Lamprechtsofen is the deepest cave in Austria and holds a distinction that makes it unique among deep caves worldwide. It has entrances at both the top and the bottom of the mountain. Most deep caves are single entrance systems. You go down and you come back up the same way. Lamprechtsofen is a through cave. The lowest entrance, open to tourists for the first few hundred meters, sits in a valley. The highest entrance is on the mountain above, 1,735 meters higher. In theory, you can enter at the top of the mountain and exit at the bottom. In practice, the traverse takes days and requires navigating underground rivers, vertical pitches, and passages so narrow that cavers must remove their equipment and push it ahead of them through gaps in the rock. In 1998, Polish cave explorer Krzysztof Resielski established the depth record for Lamprechtsofen by ascending from a deep section of the cave called the Hydra system through a series of previously unexplored vertical shafts. He climbed upward for hundreds of meters alone, connecting passages that extended the known depth to 1,632 meters at the time. The climb was done without support. If anything had gone wrong, if a rope had failed, if a hold had broken, if the water level in the passages had risen, there was no rescue team within reach. He was alone inside a mountain, climbing upward through darkness with the nearest exit over a kilometer away in any direction. The cave system is still being explored. New passages are discovered regularly. The total depth has been revised upward multiple times as exploration teams push further into the mountain. The rock is Triassic limestone, roughly 200 million years old, and the water that carved it is still flowing. The underground rivers inside Lamprechtsofen are active. They flood. They change. The cave is not a museum. It is a living system that reshapes itself with every season, a cave that goes through an entire mountain, a depth record set by a man climbing alone inside the earth with no backup, and a system so large and so active that the map is never finished because the cave keeps changing faster than anyone can chart it. Every place so far has been a cave. The next 3 are not. One is a flooded abyss with no known bottom. One is a mine so deep that it nearly killed an entire lake. And one is a chasm so deep in the ocean floor that it sits in permanent darkness where life should not exist but does. Number 6. Hranice Abyss, Czech Republic, the flooded cave where the cable ran out and the bottom was never found. in the Moravian region of the Czech Republic, beneath a forested hillside that looks entirely ordinary from the surface, there is a flooded chasm that holds a record no other place on Earth can match. The Hranice Abyss is the deepest known underwater cave in the world. And the word known is doing a lot of work in that sentence because no one has found the bottom. The entrance is a small pond in a nature reserve. The water is warm, mineral-rich, and an opaque milky turquoise. From the surface, it looks peaceful. Beneath the surface, the floor drops away into a vertical shaft that descends into darkness with no visible end. In 2016, Polish-Czech cave diver Krzysztof Starnarski became the first person to descend past 200 meters. He reached the limits of what human physiology and available equipment allowed. Below his deepest point, the passage continued. In the same year, a remotely operated vehicle was sent deeper. It descended past 300 meters, past 400. At 473 meters, the cable ran out. The robot had not reached the bottom. Its downward-facing sonar showed open water continuing below. In 2020, researchers from the Czech Geological Survey used gravity measurements and seismic imaging to estimate the true depth of the Hranice Abyss. Their analysis, published in the Journal of Geophysical Research, suggested the cave may extend to approximately 1,000 meters or more beneath the surface. The uncertainty is significant because the measurement methods are indirect. Nobody has been there. No instrument has reached it. The water temperature increases with depth, suggesting a geothermal heat source far below that has not been identified. The cave is fed by water rising from deep within the Earth's crust, not by surface drainage. It is, in geological terms, a window into something much deeper than the cave itself. 473 meters and the cable ran out. The bottom was not there. Seismic data suggest it may be twice as deep as anything the instruments have reached, and beneath the forests of the Czech Republic, a flooded shaft continues downward past the reach of any technology that has been sent to find its end. No one has gone back with a longer cable. The abyss is still waiting. Number 5. Pehesalmi Mine, Finland. The deepest mine in Europe, now hunting for dark matter. In central Finland, roughly 450 kilometers north of Helsinki, the Pehesalmi mine descends 1,444 meters into the earth. It is the deepest mine in Europe and one of the deepest zinc and copper mines ever operated anywhere in the world. Mining operations at Pehesalmi began in 1962 after a farmer discovered unusual rocks in his field and brought them to a geologist. The geologist confirmed they contained significant concentrations of zinc, copper, and pyrite. Within years, an industrial mine was operating beneath the farmer's land. The deepest working levels of the mine sit nearly 1.5 kilometers below the surface. At that depth, the rock temperature exceeds 40 degrees Celsius. The mine requires constant ventilation and cooling to remain habitable. Workers descend by elevator for roughly 10 minutes to reach the lowest levels. But Pehesalmi's most remarkable chapter began after the mining started to wind down. The deepest levels of the mine, no longer economically viable for mineral extraction, have been converted into a physics laboratory. The University of Veryovkina operates a particle physics research facility at a depth of 1,410 meters, where the 1.4 kilometers of rock above acts as a natural shield against cosmic radiation from space. At the surface, cosmic rays bombard every square meter of the Earth continuously. At 1,410 meters underground, the rock filters out virtually all of that radiation, creating one of the quietest environments on the planet for detecting subatomic particles. The laboratory has been used for experiments searching for dark matter, the invisible substance that makes up roughly 27% of the universe, but has never been directly detected. Scientists chose the bottom of a mine in Finland to look for the most elusive substance in the universe, because the only way to detect something that barely interacts with normal matter is to go somewhere that normal matter barely reaches. 1.5 kilometers of rock, a former copper mine, and a detector waiting in the silence for a particle that may pass through the entire Earth without touching anything. The deepest mine in Europe, built to extract metal from the ground, now repurposed to answer one of the most fundamental questions in physics. What is the universe made of? And the answer, if it comes, will emerge from a laboratory 1,444 meters beneath a Finnish forest where a farmer once picked up an unusual rock and changed the history of science. Number 4. Calypso Deep, Mediterranean Sea. The deepest point in a sea that most people think is shallow. Most people associate the Mediterranean with beaches, clear water, and summer holidays. They do not associate it with an ocean trench that descends over 5,000 meters below the surface. But it is there. The Calypso Deep sits in the Hellenic Trench, southwest of the Peloponnese Peninsula of Greece. Its measured depth is approximately 5,267 meters, over 5 kilometers of water between the surface and the seafloor. It is the deepest point in the Mediterranean Sea, and one of the deepest points in any enclosed sea on the planet. The Hellenic Trench was formed by the subduction of the African tectonic plate beneath the Eurasian plate, the same process that produces earthquakes across Greece, Turkey, and southern Italy. The trench is geologically active. Seismic events along its length are frequent and have produced some of the most destructive earthquakes and tsunamis in European history. The Calypso Deep has been reached by unmanned instruments, but never by a crewed vessel. The depth is sufficient to crush most standard research submersibles. The pressure at the bottom exceeds 500 atmospheres. The temperature is just above freezing. Light disappeared thousands of meters above. According to marine biologists at the Hellenic Center for Marine Research, the deep water of the Hellenic Trench contains species adapted to extreme pressure and permanent darkness. Samples brought up from below 4,000 meters have included organisms not found in any other Mediterranean habitat, species that more closely resemble deep Atlantic fauna than anything living in the sunlit waters above. Beneath the holiday resorts and cruise ships and turquoise coves, the Mediterranean drops over 5 kilometers into a trench carved by the collision of two continents. The tourists swimming at the surface are floating above a depth that would crush a submarine. The sea they think they know has a bottom that no human has ever visited, and the organisms living in that darkness have more in common with creatures from the deep Atlantic than with anything else in the Mediterranean. 3 places left. And every one of them goes deeper than anything you have seen so far. One is a cave system so deep that the expedition team lost contact with the surface for 3 days. One is a cave that has already been explored deeper than this one but may go further. And the last is a hole in the ground so deep that it changed what we thought we knew about the planet itself. Number 3. Voronezh Cave, Georgia, the cave where a diver went alone to the bottom of the world. In the Arabica Massif of the Western Caucasus Mountains, in the disputed territory of Abkhazia, a cave system descends 2,199 meters below the entrance. For over a decade, Krubera Cave held the title of the deepest cave on Earth. The entrance is a crack in limestone at roughly 2,250 meters above sea level, surrounded by alpine meadow. What lies beneath that crack took exploration teams over 15 years to reach. The cave descends through a labyrinth of vertical shafts, narrow squeezes, underground rivers, and flooded passages. Reaching the bottom requires establishing multiple underground camps, each connected by fixed ropes along pitches that exceed 100 meters. Below 1,000 meters, communication with the surface becomes unreliable. Below 1,500 meters, it is essentially impossible. The teams were alone. At the very bottom of Krubera, the passage ends in a flooded tunnel called the Terminal Sump. In 2012, Ukrainian diver Gennady Samokhin descended into this sump wearing full cave diving equipment in water barely above freezing. He pushed 52 meters below the waterline alone in the dark, at the bottom of the deepest cave on Earth, over 2 kilometers below the surface with no possibility of rescue if anything went wrong. The depth he reached, 2,199 meters below the entrance, stood as the world record until 2018. It was broken by a cave less than 15 kilometers away on the same mountain range, explored by the same community of cavers. But Krubera retained something that no depth record can capture. It was the first cave to break the 2,000-meter barrier, the first place where a human being descended more than 2 kilometers into the earth inside a natural passage. And the man who reached the deepest point did it by diving alone into flooded darkness at the absolute limit of human endurance. A cave 2,199 meters deep, a diver at the bottom. Alone, in freezing water, in the dark, 2 kilometers below the nearest sunlight, and no one on the surface could reach him if anything went wrong. Number 2. Veryovkina Cave, Georgia, the deepest cave on Earth, where the team vanished for 3 days. In March 2018, a Russian expedition entered a cave system on the Arabica Massif, less than 15 kilometers from Krubera. They believed this cave went deeper. They were right. Veryovkina Cave has been confirmed at 2,212 meters below the entrance. The deepest cave on Earth, 15 meters deeper than Krubera. A number that sounds small until you understand what those 15 meters cost. The expedition lasted weeks. The team descended through a series of shafts and meanders that required constant route finding in passages that had never been mapped. Below 1,800 meters, they entered terrain that no human being had ever seen. Every meter was new. Every passage was a decision. Left or right, up or down, squeeze through or turn back. At one point during the 2018 expedition, the team lost radio contact with the surface for 3 consecutive days. 3 days inside a cave over 2 kilometers deep with no communication, no way to call for help, no way for anyone on the surface to know whether they were alive or dead. The surface team could do nothing except wait and hope. They emerged safely. The depth was confirmed by survey measurements. Veryovkina replaced Krubera as the deepest cave in the world. According to speleological reports published by the Russian caving community, the cave contains underground rivers with water temperatures of approximately 2 degrees Celsius. The humidity is constant at 100%. The air temperature hovers just above freezing, and the silence below 1,500 meters is described by expedition members as the most complete silence they have ever experienced. Not quiet, not still, silence. The total absence of sound from a world that is more than 2 kilometers above your head, the deepest cave on Earth. An expedition that spent 3 days at the bottom with no way to tell anyone they were still alive. And a silence so total that the caving team described it as the absence of sound itself. 2,212 meters is extraordinary, but caves, no matter how deep end, they reach bedrock, they flood, they narrow to nothing. The next place does not narrow, it does not end, because the next place is not a cave at all. It is a hole drilled straight into the crust of the earth by human hands. And what they found on the way down changed what we thought we knew about the planet beneath our feet. And now, number one, this is not a natural formation. This is not a cave carved by water over millions of years. This is a hole drilled by human beings on purpose, straight down through solid rock, for 24 years. And they stopped not because they chose to, but because the earth itself said no. Number one, the Kola superdeep borehole, Russia. The deepest hole ever made by human beings. In 1970, on the Kola Peninsula in northwestern Russia, roughly 150 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, Soviet scientists began drilling a hole, not for oil, not for gas, not for minerals. For knowledge, they wanted to know what the Earth was made of, not from seismic readings, not from mathematical models, from direct physical samples brought up from deeper than anyone had ever reached before. The project was called the Kola Superdeep Borehole. It would take 24 years. The drill bit descended through granite, gneiss, and metamorphic rock, cutting a borehole roughly 23 centimeters in diameter. Progress slowed as depth increased. The rock became harder. The temperature rose. Equipment failed. Drill bits melted. New alloys had to be invented to withstand the conditions. Multiple boreholes were drilled from the same surface location because the main shaft deviated from vertical under the immense pressure and heat at depth. By 1989, the borehole had reached 12,262 meters, 12.2 kilometers straight down into the earth, the deepest point ever reached by human technology. Deeper than the Mariana Trench, deeper than any cave, deeper than any mine, 1/3 of the way through the continental crust. At that depth, the temperature was 180 degrees Celsius, far higher than any model had predicted. The rock at 12 kilometers was not the cold, brittle material that geological theory expected. It was hot. It was plastic. It behaved more like a slow-moving liquid than a solid. The drill could not grip it. The hole was trying to close itself, according to research published by the Soviet Academy of Sciences and later reviewed by Western geological institutions after the fall of the Soviet Union. The borehole produced several findings that forced revisions to existing models of the Earth's crust. First, water. At 12 kilometers, the drill encountered pockets of mineralized water, liquid water circulating through cracks in rock at depths where none was expected to exist. The source of the water was never conclusively determined. Some researchers proposed that it was primordial, trapped during the formation of the Earth's crust billions of years ago. Others suggested it was surface water that had migrated downward over geological time through fractures too small to detect from the surface. Second, life. Microbial fossils were found in rock cores extracted from depths exceeding 6 kilometers. Plankton fossils preserved in silica and magnetite in rock that was over 2 billion years old. The remains of organisms in rock that was formed before multicellular life existed on the surface of the Earth. Third, the hoax. In the late 1980s, a recording began circulating that allegedly captured audio from the deepest point of the borehole. The recording featured what sounded like thousands of voices screaming, as if the scientists had drilled into hell. The story spread worldwide. It appeared in newspapers, on TV, and eventually on the internet, where it became one of the earliest viral conspiracy theories. The recording is fabricated. It was manufactured most likely by a Finnish broadcaster, using manipulated audio from a film soundtrack. The Soviet research team never lowered a microphone into the shaft. No audio was recorded. The story has been debunked repeatedly by Russian and Western media for over 30 years. But the hoax became more famous than the science. The Kola superdeep borehole is known to millions of people as the place where scientists drilled into hell. The actual discoveries, water at impossible depths, fossils in 2-billion-year-old rock, temperatures that defied every prediction, are far more extraordinary than fabricated screaming, and far less well known. In 1992, drilling stopped. The temperature at the bottom had exceeded 180 degrees. The rock was no longer behaving like a solid. The drill could not go further. The Soviet Union was collapsing. Funding disappeared. The project was abandoned. The borehole was capped with a rusted metal lid bolted to a concrete slab. It is still there, on the Kola Peninsula. In the Russian Arctic, a metal disc roughly the size of a manhole cover, sitting in an abandoned concrete pad, surrounded by rusting Soviet-era equipment and Arctic scrub. Beneath that lid, a shaft 23 centimeters wide descends 12,262 meters into the earth. 1/3 of the way through the crust, deeper than any ocean, deeper than any cave, deeper than any mine, the deepest point ever reached by human technology. And they stopped, not because they chose to, because the planet said no. The rock was too hot. The pressure was too great. The equipment could not survive. At 12 kilometers, the Earth made it clear that humans were not welcome any deeper. The lid is still there. The shaft is still open beneath it. And whatever exists below 12,262 meters remains exactly as it has been for 4.5 billion years. Untouched, unseen, unknown. We drilled for 24 years. We made it 12 kilometers. The Earth's crust extends for another 20 to 40 kilometers below that point. And beneath the crust, the mantle stretches for nearly 3,000 kilometers more. We scratched the surface. Literally. 10 places, from a cave in the French Alps that fills with water while you are a kilometer inside it, to a flooded abyss in the Czech Republic where the cable ran out and the bottom was never found, to a hole in the Russian Arctic where scientists drilled for 24 years and the Earth itself said stop. Every one of these places is in Europe. Every one of them is beneath a surface that looks ordinary from above, and every one of them proves the same thing. We live on top of something we do not understand. We walk on it every day. We build our cities on it. We assume it is solid. It is not. It is deep. It is hot. It is alive with water and pressure and life in places where life should not exist. And we have explored less of what is beneath our feet than we have explored the surface of the moon. Which place was the deepest for you? Tell us in the comments, and if you made it to the end, you already know this channel is for you. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications. The next video takes you somewhere even more impossible. We will see you there.